everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to another episode of #EpicBookRecs. So for those of you who are new here, this is a monthly series that I host here on the Epic Reads channel where I recommend some YA books for you based on a certain theme. So this month's theme you might be able to guess based on my spooky gloves here, but that is some spooky Halloween book recs. It is October and I thought it was the perfect time of the year to give you my spooky recs. Unfortunately, I realized I used some of my really good spooky recs in some of the previous episodes, so as a bit of a primer and a bit of a recap on some of the previous episodes in #EpicBookRecs, I thought I'd let you know about those ones and then get into some more book recs this month. So if you missed my mystery book recs video a few months ago, I recommended The Diviners by Libba Bray and Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I feel like both of these have really good spooky Halloweenish vibes. This one's more of a mystery, murder mystery type vibe, and then The Diviners is definitely another murder mystery type vibe, but this one gets even more spookier and creepier and more occult than ever, and this is honestly one of the spookiest books I have read in my life, and it just gives me chills thinking about some of the scenes in this book, so definitely recommend it if you are looking for a spooky book recommendation. And then if you missed my feminist book recs video, I did mention Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson. This is another good spooky, witchy, Halloween-ish vibe book, and it is great. It's about a witch who brings back 3 of her friends from the dead to figure out who killed them, and it is honestly very spooky, a lot of fun. It's more on like the dark humor, funnier side, and it's a lot of fun. So if you are not about getting super creeped out, this is a really good one. And then I can't of course go without mentioning the paranormal monster book of my heart, and that is The Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I mentioned this in my books with music video. This features a lot of music in it, but it also features some creepy monsters and some creepy things going on in the city of Verity where this takes place, and I just absolutely love it, and I definitely think it's a very spooky, scary book to pick up. So as for the 5 new books that I want to share with you today as my spooky Halloween book recs, the first I have is Something Strange and Deadly by Susan Dennard. So this is the paperback and this is the old hardcover edition, and I read this series like a really long time ago. It's a trilogy. It's by Susan Dennard. She also has a really awesome series called The Witchlands, which I haven't read yet, but I'm really excited to. But basically this book takes place in, I think, the 1800s. It is a historical fiction book, and it takes place in Philadelphia, and it follows our main character Eleanor Fitt, who's the daughter in a family with declining wealth, and after her father dies and her brother goes missing, Eleanor is just trying to find a way to survive. So she goes looking for her brother, but she has a few other problems on her horizon because the dead have risen in Philadelphia. They are roaming the streets and she is trying to find a way to survive, and she ends up running into this elusive crew of people called the Spirit Hunters who kind of combat these supernatural forces that are kind of rising in Philadelphia. And there's a bit of a romance, there's a lot of Walking Dead. It's really, really cute. It's also a great like historical read if you were into that, but it also features a lot of like fun like dresses and corsets and expectations of the time, and I really, really enjoyed this. It was just a really fun read. It has 3 books in the series and it definitely takes a journey. You're following Eleanor through a really intense character arc and a really great romance, and I just loved all the characters in this series as well. And there's a particular character that I think shows up in the second book who I absolutely love, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I really like him as well. So really great series, definitely recommend if you are looking for a deadly, spooky Halloween read. The next book that I have to share with you is another really old favorite of mine, and I remember reading this in high school and falling in love with it because it just gave me so many spooky vibes. Like, it terrified me to the bone. It's also a retelling of a famous Halloween classic that you may have heard of, and that book is This Dark Endeavor by Kenneth Opel, and this is a retelling of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So this is the first book in a duology, I believe, and it's called The Apprenticeship of Victor Frankenstein. But basically this book is kind of a take on Frankenstein and what it would be like if Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, was a 16-year-old boy with a twin brother and who lives in his secluded life with his family and with his childhood love, Elizabeth. And so in this book you are kind of following Victor and his psychosis and the way he thinks about science, about progress, about the people around him, and you also see his curiosity and his thirst for knowledge. But Victor's thirst for knowledge does not come without consequences. There is a room within the brilliant chateau where he lives called the Dark Library, which he has always been forbidden to look into and to explore. The Dark Library contains tomes in strange languages and with forbidden knowledge and all the things that Victor's father thinks he might go out of control with. But when Victor's brother Conrad, who does not actually exist in the original Frankenstein story, when Conrad falls ill, Victor decides that he's gonna go into the dark library and find a book that contains the recipe to the elixir of life. He's determined to make sure that his brother lives forever, and that's where it kind of gets into this Frankenstein-y vibe. I absolutely love this book. It is so, so creepy. Being inside of Victor's head is the best part of it, I think, and just seeing the way that he's kind of twisted inside is super, super cool. So definitely recommend this if you're looking for more of a like psychological, spooky read. Definitely a great one. It's also on the shorter side if you're looking for a short read before Halloween. Definitely a great one for the spooky vibes. All right, the next book that I have for you here is one that I finished very recently and absolutely fell in love with. It was really great. I loved all the characters in it, and that book is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. So this is a book that I was interested in the second I heard about it, but basically it's like a historical fantasy-ish book. It takes place in our real historical world, but in kind of an alternate history, and in this alternate history, the American Civil War is kind of stopped by the rise of the dead. The dead in the battlefield start rising up and become zombies that the people in the book call shamblers. So you can get turned into a shambler if you get bit by one, and it's kind of like a disease. And so America gets overrun by these shamblers. So the Civil War is kind of derailed in order to kind of deal with the dead problem. And so the book follows our main character, Jane McKean, and this is many years after the War of the Dead, and quite a while after the shambler problem has kind of been contained, but it's still kind of lingering in the South as well, and there's fear that it's going to overrun the cities in the North. But there's also another aspect to this whole War of the Dead. There was an act put in place that decreed that Black and Native American people were forced to be in these schools that trained them to protect their white superiors from the dead. And so Jane McKean attends one of these like prep schools called Miss Preston's to learn to become an attendant, which is basically a bodyguard and a companion to the wealthy white ladies of society. So this book starts off with Jane in her boarding school and, you know, learning to fight and all of that, but it does quickly turn into something else, and she does end up traveling with other people from her school and some really great characters. I really love the discussion of race in this book, but also just the creepy parts with the shamblers and the dead, and Jane being an awesome fighter. She is so great. She is like a wizard with a gun and a scythe, like the little curved sword that she's holding here. Really awesome. This book also is really funny at sometimes. It takes a heavy subject and approaches it in a funny and interesting way. So this is definitely a book that you can pick up if you wanted something slightly spooky but not like completely focused on the spooky aspect. This is a great one. There's some really great fight scenes, really great zombie scenes, but still a lot of great character, historical elements, and great themes as well. The next book that I have here is another old favorite of mine, and it also features a lot of dead people in it, and that is The Archived by Victoria Schwab. I already mentioned the Savage song, but I feel like Victoria Schwab as like an author brand is just spooky all over. But The Archived is definitely one of my all-time favorites. This one is more of a paranormal book. It follows our main character, Mackenzie Bishop, and she and her parents are moving to a new home. They are taking over this kind of old hotel, and there's all these creepy residents in the hotel, and it's kind of old and dingy and all of that, but it has a lot of history and a lot of character. And Mackenzie has a special ability, and she's one of these things called a keeper. So she basically has the power to touch any object and kind of go back in time and see what has happened in a place or with an object and kind of revert back time. She can kind of see into the past. But she is also tasked with the unfortunate job of putting away unruly spirits called histories back into their place in a library of the dead. So in this alternate version of the world, in the spooky version, the dead rest on shelves in this kind of library called the Archived, and there are these librarians who kind of look after the dead, and Mackenzie is one of the keepers who has to make sure that the dead don't escape the archive, because very dangerous things can happen if they do. But Mackenzie is also reeling from some very personal deaths in her life. She had a father figure that died, and also her little brother who died, and so she is dealing with a lot of grief as well. That's a huge aspect of the book. And there's also a little bit of a romance in this book. There is a boy who shows up and who is very cute as well, and there's a bit of a romance in here as well, and I really enjoyed that. But yes, seeing Mackenzie kind of fight unruly spirits and figure out the mysteries that are going on in the archive is just super cool and super spooky, and it's definitely the perfect book for Halloween. I really feel that. And if you are into like ghost stories and things, this is definitely a really great one. All right, the next book that I have here is one that I did not expect to be spooky, but it ended up being super spooky, and I honestly got like chilled to my bones. And that book is House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig. this book just blew me away. This basically takes place in kind of a fantasy world. It follows a bunch of sisters who are also princesses in this like kingdom by the sea, and they have a very strong mythology of salt and sea gods and all of that. But when the 12 sisters start dying off mysteriously, they know there might be a curse afoot, and they're trying to figure out why they're all dying. And the main character, Jananie, is worrying for her sisters and for her family and their future, but her and her sisters are also very tired of mourning all of the deaths that keep occurring in their family. They want to kind of move on with their lives, and so when they get the opportunity to go to these incredible magical balls in a kingdom far away, they jump on the chance. And so this book is kind of a retelling of 12 Dancing Princesses. If you know that fairy tale or story, it takes that story as a touchstone and kind of broadens from there. But this book was just not a book I expected to be spooky, and it just was so spooky. Like, there's a lot of death in it, but I did not expect it to be spooky, and it gets really spooky. There's ghosts in here, there's supernatural beings that do very crazy things, and there's a lot of mystery to this book as well. I think the mystery aspect was really, really huge and really lent itself to the spooky vibe of this book. There were scenes that just gave me chills in this book. So I definitely recommend it if you are looking for kind of a more mysterious, spooky read. If you are looking for something that will twist your brain around, this is definitely the one for you. All right, and the last book that I have for you today is a very spooky book that I finished very recently, and that is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. This is the exclusive Owl Crate edition cover. So it is bone white instead of black, but it's still very, very spooky and creepy. Basically, this book follows 17-year-old Rin, who is a gravedigger in a remote village called Colburn that abuts this mysterious mountain forest. And in that forest, there are stories of dead rising, and recently more of the dead have been rising, and so people are getting scared and they're burning their dead instead. And so Rin is kind of out of a job because she is a gravedigger. And having suffered the loss of her parents, she and her siblings are kind of struggling to make ends meet. They're hanging onto their family home and their gravedigging profession, but it's not really feasible anymore. The risen corpses are known as bone houses, and there are many stories of them rising because of an old curse upon the land, and nobody really believes Rin because these are all old stories. But then when a stranger named Ellis comes to town from the prince's castle, the dead start rising again, and they actually lead an attack against Colburn. And so Rin agrees to lead Ellis into the mountains and into the forest to find a way to stop the dead from rising. This is a really spooky, mysterious read. All of the dead was just really, really creepy. Also, just Rin's profession was really creepy. Another thing I really loved about this book was the family dynamics between Rin and her siblings. There's also a goat character in this book who I absolutely loved and who was like the best part of the book, the goat. Love the goat. So awesome. And like, the goat doesn't have a name, it's just the goat. And it was awesome. So if you're looking for a spooky, deadly read, which is also kind of mysterious, and if you're looking for a more mythology-esque read, then this is definitely the one to pick up. But those are all of the books that I want to share with you today. I really hope you enjoyed this recommendation video of some spooky Halloween books. I really hope you'll pick one up before the end of the month so you can get your spooky vibes on. I absolutely love this time of year. I love the fall, and it's just really great. So I'm really excited to just curl up with one of these books and just chill out, and it's gonna be totally awesome. So please leave me a comment down below of your favorite spooky Halloween reads. There's probably 100 that I didn't mention, so I'd love to hear them down below. And as always, let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're planning to read them. I absolutely love hearing your thoughts and your recommendations because I get some really good ones from you guys. But that is about all I have to say, so thank you so much for watching, and happy Halloween. I will see you in the next episode of #EpicBookRecs. Bye.